Hey guys, welcome back to New Record Day. My name is Ron. If you're into two-channel audio, consider yourself an audiophile or music enthusiast, welcome home. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you know when the next video drops. So in today's video, we're going to kick off the review of the Klipsch Heresy by diving into sound clips with commentary. Today's video is being sponsored by Safe & Sound, and if anything Klipsch, the Heresies, or including their entire heritage line, floats your boat, Safe & Sound is the place to get them. With award-winning customer service, lifetime tech support, and killer play now and pay later programs, what are you waiting for? Click on the links down below and bookmark Safe & Sound, and if you decide to pull the trigger on anything, just tell them that Ron sent you and they will certainly take care of you. Okay, if you're new to the channel or sound clips with commentary, let me give you a quick rundown. We have a secret weapon here at NRD, and his name is Randy. Randy is a KU100 Newman binaural dummy head, and it is the closest thing that I have found to giving you a realistic recording of what's actually happening in the room. With that being said, it's not perfect, not by any stretch, and that's where my commentary comes into play. So, after each song, I'll jump in here and tell you what I heard in the room to help close the gap of what's lost in the many different variables, starting with YouTube compression and ending with whatever the heck you are playing the clips back on. And that reminds me, folks, binaural recordings are intended for headphones. Please take this moment to grab a pair and toss them on your noggin. If you don't have a pair of headphones, I'll leave some links down below of the headphones that I use when I listen to the sound clips and I do all the editing. So pay attention to the description box, and those are Amazon affiliate links, so I do get a small commission if you decide to pull the trigger. Full disclosure there. Last, the gear that we are using for today's video adventure is the stack of shit just beyond my left shoulder, and no, those jokes never get old. Ever. So yeah, we have the amazing Freya Plus with the tubes engaged because that's the right way to do it, and that is being fed by the smooth sounding Bifrost 2, which is going into a pair of Aegers, which are delicious sounding continuity Class A monoblocks and are one of my absolute favorite amps on the market today. Last, all the clips used in today's video are downloadable to my patrons and a perk for signing up. I don't list the song titles or song names for this reason, but you could also use Shazam on your phone if you're trying to hunt something down. In any event, let's get this party started and have some freaking fun. Okay, headphones on, sound clips with commentary, go.
Sunsets in Boston, kissing yellow concrete. We watched all of them together until we couldn't go to sleep. Wish it lasted forever, but it faded away. I was wrong, you were right. We couldn't stand tall under the fire. Somewhere I can see the silver lining, but it's so far away.
Alright, so this very first track is kind of a scaled down acoustic number, kind of reminds me of, I don't know, kind of island music or Hawaiian. It's just pretty. I like the guy's voice. I think that he has a nice tone to his voice. And it starts off with this whistling, and then we have this acoustic, and we have a little bit of percussion going on. And I use this track to quickly identify a couple of things. And the first thing that I noticed with the Heresies is, first and foremost, the overall tone of what I'm hearing is pretty dang good. And I would say it is surprisingly good and better than what I expected when I first fired up the Heresies. And what I mean by that, and this is important to note, all of the Heresies before this version, Series 4, they've had a tilted top end. And I do know that Klipsch reworked the crossover and the voicing of the speaker to tame it down. And as soon as that whistling started, I was like, oh no, here's gonna be that classic Heresy sound. And to my surprise, it was actually fairly balanced. Not the most balanced or linear sounding speaker that I've ever heard, but it was pleasant. And I gotta say, I liked that part of the song quite a bit. Now, as the track plays, there's two other things that I think that are worth mentioning. That acoustic guitar actually has a bit more resolution than what I think the Heresies were picking up. And if you are a patron, this is going to be a huge advantage because you can play the actual track, listen to it on your headphones, and then compare it with what the Heresies are doing in room with the binaural dummy head. And the same loss of resolution that you are hearing, I actually hear in the room. I feel like there's some body, some upper mid-range body in that guitar that I think the Heresy is missing out on. It's not a deal breaker situation, but I do notice that there's something going on with this Heresy, and when I do the official review and I take a look at measurements, I might be able to figure out what the heck is actually going on here. Do we have some, ups and downs and a little bit of a roller coaster action going on when it comes to upper mid-range? Because that's typically what happens when you have a loss of resolution or it doesn't sound like a mirror image of what the song actually sounds like. So that was another thing that I noticed. Another thing that I took note of is going to be in mid-bass and bass. And there is definitely going to be some box coloration with the Heresy. I don't think they are using a ton of bracing in this cabinet. And I think that what Klipsch is probably going for is a bit of bloom or a bit of excitement in that lower mid-bass to upper mid-bass frequencies. And you know what? Here's the deal. A lot of folks like that sound. They're attracted to, that type of kind of, heavier kick drum sound. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that it can be fun. It's a bit of a party type vibe, if you will. I just think that it's worth noting that, and you definitely hear it on this track, is you hear that box waking up. And it's something that you need to know about if you decide to pull the trigger on the Heresies. I gotta say, if there is an ace up the sleeve of any decent compression driver, it is the way that it translates anything brass. I think that saxophones, trumpets, anything jazz, you play that on the Heresies, and I think it sounds pretty spectacular, especially when you have tubes in the rig somewhere. And I really like how the Heresies play anything brass, and this track is no exception to that. At the same time, I do think that we need to take note that, well, in a lot of jazz music, you do have an upright bass, and knowing what we've already identified in the Heresies is you might find that the bass is going to be a little bit boxy sounding, a little bit boomy sounding, if you will. It's not going to be the cleanest or clearest or the most articulate and defined sounding bass that you have ever heard. So you just have to take that into consideration, and I think that you can clearly hear that in the sound clips. With that being said, look, I think that compression drivers, when done well, man, I think they really pull into the lead when it comes to playing back jazz. So if you are a huge jazz buff and you like what you're hearing and you want to hear more of it with the Heresies, then this might be a safe purchase for you, especially if what you're hearing in the bass is not alarming or bothering you, or, you know, you're sitting there going, man, that brass sounds awesome, Ron's right, but man, that upright bass, it just sounds boxy or it sounds kind of bloated. If that's not you and you're going, hey, no, I'm actually fine with everything and I love the way that brass sounds, then I would say that the Heresy is going to be a fantastic choice. And in that realm of music, I think it's a pretty easy recommendation, to be honest with you. It sounds really good.
Wanna go out and face the cold, but it's a really good time for a monologue. Can't let this pass, I find it hard to breathe. Time is up, the bell has rang, and it's really hard to understand that losing you now is the only choice for me.
Yeah, so female vocals on the Heresy. Not bad, actually. Here I am laughing because I'm kind of surprised by this, and I don't know why I would be surprised by this. The Heresy 4 has been completely reworked in terms of its voicing. I do know that they dropped the top end from, you know, all the Heresies that we have heard before the Series 4. And you know what? I think that might be paying off for Klipsch, because I don't think that this speaker ever gets really all that fatiguing. I don't think that it ever plays female vocals in a way that I grow tired of listening to female vocals. You know, what's actually kind of funny is, if anything, I find that some of the top end, upper mid-range female vocals, it can sound a little bit confusing to me. And what I mean by that is, there's times where I'm convinced that I've heard actually a little bit more resolution than what the Heresies are showing me in some frequencies, and then in other frequencies it sounds either neutral or maybe just a little bit hot. And so what this tells me, and I don't know until I actually really spend more time with the speaker and take some measurements and see what the heck is actually going on, what this usually tells me is that we have a bit of a roller coaster on top. And, you know, the speaker is not completely linear. It's not completely balanced. And so it is a little bit of a mixed bag with female vocals for me. But the good news is this: it is never offensive. And I think that the overall texture, the presence that you get from the compression drivers, it's pleasing. And I found myself really enjoying most of what I heard as I was listening to Norah Jones or Dominique Fils Amy, if I'm saying her name right. That's a recent artist that I've been in love with. And it could just be based on the pitch of the singer and where she is, but I'm getting long-winded. For me, the Heresy with female vocals, it does a pretty good job, and not the end-all be-all speaker for me, but it does some pretty cool stuff, and I think that it gets a passing grade. So knowing that Klipsch is all about pissing off your neighbors, and no, I'm not being mean or saying weird things, that actually is one of their taglines, I thought that it only made sense to try some electric guitars and to rock out with the Heresies. And this track that we just played is exactly that. And I'm going to go ahead and give a nod to the Heresies in that these would be a very fun party speaker. There's no doubt in my mind, if you are not what I would say the most critical listener on planet Earth, and it's not about did these speakers end up drawing a perfectly straight line, and you just want to have some fun and you want a great party speaker, I gotta say, I think that the Heresy rocking out with pretty much anything rock, it's like peanut butter and jelly. And I think that they do a great job with that entire genre of music. No doubt about that. Yeah, so there's another number that is going to be rock-centric, just to give you another example as to what I was just saying. And guess what? I'm not going to be long-winded about this because the Heresies know how to rock. But, see, you knew there was a but in there. You're like, oh, he can't just be good. Ron, what are you going to say next? But I think you need a sub. I do. And you know, knowing that I'm seeing a drop-off in the Heresies around 65, 70 hertz, somewhere in there, that's not digging down low enough to really rock out for me. I mean, I want some deep, meaningful freaking bass. And, you know, I will say that while these are an awesome party speaker, they are not going to bring a lot of serious thunder when it comes to anything below literally 60 hertz. So in the event where you are willing to invest in a couple of subwoofers, and of course you need 2 subwoofers, and yeah, play some AC/DC, the Heresies, you're going to have a lot of fun. I've tried it, and that is the thing. My biggest takeaway is I kind of was pulled out of analytical mode, and I was just going, hey, you know what? This is not the most linear sounding speaker that I've ever heard. There's no doubt about that. But you know what? I don't really know if I give a rip right now, because this is rock and roll at heart, and it's a lot of fun. So those are my thoughts when it comes to rock-centric music. You might need some subs. You probably need some subs. If you go that direction, then you have, I think, the complete picture, and the Heresies will not let you down at that point. So this next track is a little bit weird. It kind of reminds me of like Sigur Rós and Radiohead. Like if they had a kid, it would be this song. And it's kind of cool because there's a lot of like atmospheric type stuff going on when I'm listening to it in the room. And I'm trying to lock onto anything that would be in the time domain. I'm going to say that the Heresies do a pretty good job. It's not the end-all, be-all, best that I've ever heard, and I think that some of the soundstage capabilities of the Heresies and getting them to really let go and just give me the performance, especially when it comes to stuff that is hanging out in the soundstage, it's pretty challenging. I would say that you need to start with getting them up off the ground, because one thing that I noticed it specifically on this track, is when you have them on the ground, there's a large concentration of music in like the lower thirds of everything. And I didn't really care for that. I felt like everything needed to be lifted. And with that, I wanted to hear more stuff where I feel like it belongs and where I've heard it with pretty much every single other loudspeaker except for the Heresies. And with the Heresies, it's kind of sitting down low. And so it's something to keep in mind that when we start talking about things that are kind of hanging out in the stratosphere of time domain, the placement of those items is a really big deal. And so after some experimenting, and I didn't record this, but after some experimenting with getting them up off the ground, it did help, and it helped a lot. And when I did that, I was pretty happy with most of the things that I'm looking for when it comes to after that initial hit, or some effects that are happening, maybe even just the sound of the room where the performance is recorded. Can I hear things bouncing off the walls? Can I hear deep into the room? With the Heresies, not the end-all be-all speaker by any stretch of the imagination, but they did a pretty good job, and I was pretty happy with their performance when it came to the time domain.
Don't wanna be in love if it's not with you. Don't wanna cry that extra tear. Don't want to make mountains move. Let summer go, tell my skin to forget every little thing about you.
I recently did a sound clips video with a number of different loudspeakers, and the Heresies were involved in that shootout, and I was actually honing in on piano, and I'll say the same thing about this track as well as what I said in that video, and that is, does the speaker sound like it is able to play the piano in a realistic way? And it might just be compression drivers and one of the strengths of a compression driver, but I like the translation of anything piano when it comes to the Heresies. So this track is no exception. The female vocals sound fine. There's nothing that sounds edgy or bright or forward, nothing that sounds chalky or alarming in her voice. And on top of that, I like the sound of the piano, and the Heresies did a great job with it. No doubt about that. All right, so this track is pretty much textbook fun when it comes to the Heresies. Acoustics, it's percussive, it's exciting, it kind of gets you on the edge of your seat because it just has this like beating rhythm to it. And if you can get past the fact that that box is certainly waking up on a lot of those punches, like you can hear that box blooming. You can hear the box blooming. There's no doubt about that. If you can either A, embrace it, or B, you're not bothered by it, these are the kind of tracks that I would be playing on the Heresies. I think they're a lot of fun. Again, it's something that I think that you could just kickstart a party and people would be rocking out. They'd be, you know, tapping their toes and having a great time. And I think that the Heresies are a very fun loudspeaker with this type of really energetic and engaging music. No doubt about that. here is another textbook example of pretty much the exact same thing that we were just talking about. Blues. Anything that just has some snap and some body. There's something that a compression driver does, and it's all about, I mentioned this when I reviewed the JBL HDI 3600s, it's all about presence. There's just something realistic and tangible about the strings, and they have life, and they have pep, and they kind of lead the charge. There's just something lively and energetic about that presentation when it comes to acoustics, when it comes to percussion, when it comes to brass. All of that stuff I think the Heresy does a fantastic job with, and this track is no exception to that. Absolutely fantastic.
Civil rights, you demand that I eternize your name. Walk ahead. You cover us in shame, and I take the blame. Living by the rules to which high school blues. Walk ahead.
All right, so we have our last kind of rock song, if you will, and we have a female singer at the helm. And again, I think that finishing up these sound clips with commentary, I would end this video by saying the Heresy, it's got rock and roll in its soul. It does. And I know that sounds a bit cheesy and cliche. It's not the speaker for me. And this has been one of those speakers that has been a bit strange because I'm looking for a bit more of a linear response, a little bit more of a well-behaved loudspeaker, if you will. And yet I can give a nod of respect to the Heresy in that, look, I think that the voicing is decent. I think that they could have gone in a more dangerous direction than they did, and had they not tamed that top end like they did with the Series 4, I think that was a smart move. And I think that this is now a pretty easy to recommend loudspeaker as long as you understand the disclaimer of caution, which is, number one, you do, I think, need a sub if you want to hit big boy bass. And what I mean by big boy bass is anything below 50 hertz with confidence, you're going to be investing in subs. Also, box coloration, call it what you want. You can call it bloom. I call it resonance. That is a part of that rock and roll feeling that you get with these speakers. And perhaps this is just them giving a nod to the heritage line that, yeah, no, that's what this is about, is we're paying respect to, you know, the old way of doing a loudspeaker. And you know what? Go and get yourself a pair of Advents. Go and get yourself an old pair of JBLs, because you're going to experience pretty much the exact same thing. You're going to hear box coloration. It's going to be a part of that sound. It's going to be a part of that charm, part of that rock and roll type of a feel. And it certainly comes with the Heresies. There's no doubt about it. So, you know, those are going to be the disclaimers. I think that the overall voicing from mid-band and beyond can be a little bit confusing at times. There's times where I wish there was more resolution, and then there's times where I feel like there is enough resolution, and then there are times where I feel like maybe it's just a little bit baked. It's just a tiny bit hot. But as my dad would say, we're picking flies out of horse turds, and I have no idea what he meant by that, but I'm going to go ahead and use it because I think that's what we might be doing if I start trying to analyze this speaker too much, because at the end of the day, the Heresy is fun. And there's a lot of music enthusiasts out there that just want to have fun. Both boys and girls just want to have fun. Yeah. And that's it. Sound clips with commentary. Klipsch Heresy. And we will see you guys in the next video.